The morning the letter arrived, I was barely holding it together. The kids were at school, the house was quiet, and I was sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by unpaid bills and a half-empty coffee cup. The past few months had been a blur of exhaustion and anxiety since Mark's death. I hadn't had a moment to catch my breath, let alone figure out how we were going to survive. When I saw the official-looking envelope mixed in with the usual pile of mail, I almost ignored it. But something about it caught my eye. A faint memory of my grandmother mentioning a distant cousin, Baba Laura. I tore it open with shaking hands, expecting another bill or some bureaucratic nonsense. Instead, I found something completely unexpected. Dear Mrs. Sofia Ivanova, the letter began, written in a formal, almost antiquated style. We regret to inform you of the passing of your relative, Laura Kuznetsova, known as Baba Laura. In accordance with her final wishes, you have been named the sole heir to her estate, located in the village of Dubravka. I blinked, rereading the words to make sure I hadn't imagined them. An inheritance? From Baba Laura? I barely knew the woman, had only met her a handful of times as a child, and yet here I was, holding a letter that said she had left me a house. For a moment, I just sat there, trying to process it all. The idea of an inheritance felt surreal, almost like a lifeline being thrown to someone drowning in debt and despair. But then reality crashed back in, and I felt a pang of guilt. Could I really uproot the kids and move to a place I'd never even heard of? Was it fair to them? But what choice did I have? The bills weren't going to pay themselves, and I couldn't afford to stay in our current apartment for much longer. That evening, I gathered the kids in the living room. I didn't want to overwhelm them, but they needed to know what was happening. I got some news today, I began, trying to keep my voice steady. Natalie, my oldest, looked up from her book with a mixture of curiosity and concern. What is it, Mom? Is everything okay? I hesitated, searching for the right words. Well, you all remember Baba Laura, don't you? Grandma's cousin. Barely, said Ivan, my second oldest, frowning. She was the one with all those cats, right? I smiled despite myself. Yes, that's her. She passed away recently, and she left us her house. A house? Danny, my youngest, perked up, like a big one, with a yard. I nodded. Yes, it's an old house in a village called Dubravka. It's a bit far from here, but it's ours if we want it. The room fell silent as the kids processed the news. I could see the wheels turning in their heads, the mix of excitement and uncertainty playing out on their faces. Are we moving there? Natalie finally asked, her tone cautious. I took a deep breath. I think we should. It's not going to be easy, and I know it's a big change, but we need this, guys. We need a fresh start, and this could be our chance. Ivan crossed his arms, looking skeptical. What about school? And our friends? We can't just leave everything behind. I know it's hard, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. But we'll figure it out. We'll make it work. The house is big enough for all of us, and there's a school in the village. It might not be what we're used to, but it could be good for us. There was a long pause, and then Natalie spoke up again, her voice soft. If it means we can stay together then, maybe it's not such a bad idea. Her words felt like a balm to my weary soul. I reached out and squeezed her hand, grateful for her support. Thank you, Nat. I know it's scary, but we're going to be okay. We'll make this work. The other kids were less enthusiastic, but they didn't protest. They knew, just as I did, that we didn't have many options left. We were hanging by a thread, and this house, this unexpected gift, might be the only thing that could save us. As the evening wore on, I found myself staring at the photograph of the house that had been included with the letter. It was an old, weathered building with ivy crawling up the stone walls and a wide porch that looked like it had seen better days. Despite its age, there was something inviting about it, something that called to me. I couldn't explain it, but I felt a strange connection to the place, as if it was waiting for us. Mom, Danny's voice pulled me out of my thoughts. He had crawled into my lap, his small hands clutching the edge of the photo. Do you think the house will like us? I smiled down at him, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. I think it already does, sweetie. I think it's been waiting for us. His eyes widened in wonder, and he looked at the picture again. Then I think I'll like it too. As I hugged him close, I felt a surge of determination. This wasn't going to be easy, but for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. We would go to Dubrovka, we would make that house our home, and somehow we would find a way to get through this. The next few days were a whirlwind of packing, planning, and saying goodbye to the life we had known. The kids were subdued, but there was an undercurrent of excitement as they imagined what the new house might be like. I tried to stay focused, to keep the doubts and fears at bay, but every now and then I would catch a glimpse of myself in the mirror and see the worry etched in my face. Finally, the day of the move arrived. We loaded up the car, cramming as much as we could into the trunk and backseat. I took one last look at our apartment, a place that had once been filled with love and laughter but had become a reminder of all we had lost. It was time to leave, time to start over. Ready? I asked the kids as I slid into the driver's seat. Ready, they echoed, though their voices were a mixture of emotions, excitement, fear, and hope. As we drove away from the city, I kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other on the photograph of the house, folded neatly in my lap. I didn't know what awaited us in Dubrovka, but I had to believe that this was the right choice. This house, this inheritance from Baba Laura, was more than just a roof over our heads. It was our chance to heal, to rebuild our lives, and to find some semblance of peace. And as we drove further away from the life we had known, I whispered a silent promise to myself. No matter what happened, I would do whatever it took to protect my family and make this house a home. The day we left the city was grey and overcast, matching the heaviness in my heart. The weather forecast had promised rain, and I couldn't help but feel it was some kind of omen. As I loaded the last of our bags into the car, I took a deep breath and looked up at the apartment building where we had spent so many years. It felt like I was leaving behind more than just a home. I was saying goodbye to a life that had been irrevocably changed. "Mom, do you think it's going to rain?" Danny asked, tugging at my sleeve as he craned his neck to look at the sky. I forced a smile and ruffled his hair. "Maybe a little, but it'll be okay. We'll be on the road soon, and by the time we get to the new house, the sun might be out." Ivan, who was standing by the car with his arms crossed, gave me a skeptical look. "It's going to take forever to get there, isn't it?" "It's a long drive, yes," I admitted, trying to sound more optimistic than I felt. "But we'll make it fun. We'll listen to music, play some games, and before you know it, we'll be at our new home." "Do they even have internet there?" Ivan asked, clearly unconvinced that this move could be anything but a disaster. "Ivan, please," Natalie chimed in, shooting him a warning glance. "Mom's already stressed enough." "It's okay, Nat," I said softly, appreciating her attempt to ease the tension. "I know this is hard for everyone, but we're doing this for a reason. We need a fresh start, and this house is our chance to do that." Natalie nodded, trying to be supportive, but I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. She was always the responsible one, the one who tried to hold everything together, even when it felt like the world was falling apart. I hated that she had to grow up so fast, that she felt the weight of our circumstances as much as I did. With the kids finally settled in the car, I took one last look at our apartment. The memories of Mark flooded back, his laughter, his voice, the way he used to chase the kids around the living room. But those memories were tinged with pain now, a constant reminder of what we had lost. I blinked back the tears that threatened to spill over and forced myself to turn away. "All right, everyone ready?" I asked as I climbed into the driver's seat. "Ready," came the reluctant chorus from the back seat. "Let's do this," I whispered to myself, gripping the steering wheel tightly as I started the car. As we drove through the city, the familiar streets began to blur, becoming a patchwork of memories that I was trying to hold onto and let go of at the same time. The kids were unusually quiet, lost in their own thoughts, as we passed by their school, the park where we used to spend Saturday afternoons, and the grocery store where Mark and I would argue over what to make for dinner. Once we hit the highway, the city gradually gave way to open countryside. The landscape changed from concrete and steel to rolling hills and dense forests. The kids started to stir as the scenery became less familiar. "Look, cows!" Danny shouted, pressing his face against the window. "And horses. I've never seen so many in real life." I smiled at his excitement, relieved that he was starting to embrace the change, even if just a little. "There's going to be a lot more to see once we get to the village. Maybe we can even visit a farm." "Do you think they'll have animals near the house?" he asked eagerly. "Maybe," I replied, though I wasn't entirely sure. The photo of the house had shown a large yard, but I hadn't paid much attention to what was beyond it. The thought of exploring the area with the kids filled me with a mix of apprehension and hope. As the hours passed, the tension in the car began to ease. The kids fell into a rhythm of alternating between napping, snacking, and chatting quietly amongst themselves. Every now and then, they'd ask questions about the new house, the village, or what our life would be like. I did my best to answer, but the truth was, I didn't have many answers myself. I was just as uncertain as they were, navigating this new chapter in our lives one step at a time. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we reached the outskirts of Dubravka. The village was small and quaint, nestled among thick woods and rolling fields. It felt like a place time had forgotten, untouched by the chaos of the modern world. The narrow streets were lined with old stone houses, each one with its own story to tell. "Is this it?" Natalie asked, leaning forward to get a better look. "Yes," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "This is Dubravka." "It's so quiet," Ivan remarked, his usual sarcasm absent, like there's no one around. As if on cue, an old man on a bicycle pedaled slowly past us, tipping his hat in a polite, albeit slightly wary gesture. The kids stared after him, clearly unused to the slower pace of village life. "This is going to be weird," Ivan muttered under his breath, but there was no real malice in his tone, just the uncertainty of a teenager trying to adjust to something new. The road to Baba Laura's house wound through the village and then out into the countryside, where the trees grew thicker and the air felt cooler. When we finally reached the house, it stood at the end of a long gravel driveway, flanked by tall, ancient oaks. It was just as I remembered from the photograph, but somehow more imposing in person. "Wow," Danny breathed as he took in the sight of the sprawling, ivy-covered house. "It's like something out of a storybook." I parked the car and turned off the engine, sitting there for a moment as I absorbed the reality of it all. This was our new home. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. "Okay," I said, trying to sound upbeat as I turned to the kids. "Let's go check it out." The front door creaked as I pushed it open, the sound echoing through the empty hallways. The house smelled of dust and old wood, a scent that brought back vague memories of childhood visits. I could almost hear Baba Laura's voice in my head, speaking in her thick, accented Russian, telling me stories of the old country and the history of this house. The kids spread out, exploring the vast, unfamiliar space. Their footsteps echoed off the high ceilings as they moved from room to room, discovering the nooks and crannies of their new home. "Mom, look at this," Natalie called from the living room, where she had found a large, faded rug that looked like it had been there for centuries. "It's beautiful," I said, running my fingers over the intricate patterns. "This house has so much history." "It's kind of creepy," Ivan added, peering into a dusty mirror that hung on the wall. "But in a cool way, I guess." "Do you think there are ghosts?" Danny asked, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and excitement. I chuckled, ruffling his hair. "No ghosts, sweetie, just a lot of memories." As we continued to explore, I couldn't help but feel a strange connection to the house. It was old and worn, but there was a warmth to it, a sense that it had been waiting for us. Maybe, just maybe, this place could be the fresh start we needed. Later, as the sun began to set and the kids started to tire from the excitement of the day, we gathered in the kitchen, a room that felt surprisingly cozy despite its age. The kids had found some mismatched chairs, and I pulled out a dusty tablecloth from one of the cabinets to cover the table. "I know it's been a long day," I said as I set down the sandwiches I had made earlier, "but I just want to say how proud I am of all of you. I know this move wasn't easy, and it's going to take some time to adjust, but we're in this together." "Here's to new beginnings," Natalie said, raising her juice box in a mock toast. "To new beginnings," we all echoed, clinking our juice boxes and cups together. As I looked around the table at my children, I felt a flicker of hope. This house might be old and unfamiliar, but it was ours. We had a roof over our heads, a place to call home, and the chance to rebuild our lives. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay. The first day in our new home had been exhausting. After hours of unpacking, cleaning, and trying to make the old house feel like ours, I was more than ready to collapse into bed. The kids had settled into their rooms surprisingly well, their initial hesitation giving way to curiosity about their new surroundings. But as night fell, the unfamiliar creaks and groans of the house began to take on a more sinister tone. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling as the shadows danced across it. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows and sending chills down my spine. This house, with its worn wooden floors and drafty windows, had a way of making even the smallest sounds seem amplified. Every creak felt like a footstep, every gust of wind like a whisper. I tried to convince myself that it was just the house settling, that these noises were normal for a place this old. But the unease that had settled in the pit of my stomach wouldn't go away. "Mom." Danny's small voice broke the silence, and I turned to see him standing in the doorway, clutching his teddy bear. "Danny, what's wrong?" I asked, sitting up and patting the bed beside me. "I heard something," he whispered, his eyes wide with fear. "Something outside my window." I wrapped my arms around him, trying to reassure him even as my heart raced. "It's just the wind," sweetheart. "This house is old, and it makes a lot of noise. There's nothing to be afraid of." "But it didn't sound like the wind," he insisted, his voice trembling. "It sounded like someone walking." I swallowed hard, my own fears threatening to spill over. But I couldn't let Danny see how scared I was. I had to be strong for him. "Tell you what, why don't you sleep in here with me tonight? We'll keep each other safe." He nodded eagerly, climbing into bed beside me and snuggling under the covers. I held him close, listening to his breathing slowly even out as he drifted off to sleep. But even with him safe in my arms, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. The hours ticked by, the darkness pressing in around us. Every so often, I would hear a creak or a thud, and I would tense up, waiting for something to happen. But the house remained silent, as if holding its breath. I must have dozed off at some point because I was jolted awake by a loud bang that echoed through the house. My heart leaped into my throat as I sat up, instinctively pulling Danny closer. He stirred but didn't wake, still deep in his dreams. For a moment, I thought it was just the house settling again, but then I heard it, soft, shuffling footsteps coming from downstairs. My blood ran cold. There was no mistaking it this time. Someone was in the house. I carefully slid out of bed, trying not to wake Danny, and grabbed the heavy flashlight I had left on the nightstand. The metal felt cold and reassuring in my hand as I crept toward the bedroom door, my pulse pounding in my ears. As I reached the hallway, I hesitated, listening intently. The footsteps were slow and deliberate, as if the person downstairs was trying to move quietly but not quite succeeding. I forced myself to take a deep breath and started down the stairs, one step at a time. The old wooden steps creaked under my weight, each sound echoing through the empty house. I winced with every step, my nerves stretched thin as I approached the bottom of the stairs. The footsteps had stopped, leaving the house eerily silent once again. I reached the bottom of the stairs and scanned the darkened living room with the flashlight, the beam cutting through the shadows. Everything looked as it should. The furniture was in place, the windows were closed. But something felt off, a presence that I couldn't quite explain. Then, just as I was about to turn back, I saw it, a figure standing by the front door. My breath caught in my throat as I froze, the flashlight trembling in my hand. The figure was tall and shrouded in darkness, their features obscured by the shadows. They were facing away from me, as if they were looking out the door. "Who's there?" I demanded, trying to sound braver than I felt. The figure didn't move, didn't respond. They just stood there, silent and unmoving. I took a step forward, the flashlight beam focused on the figure. I said, "Who's there? What do you want?" Finally, the figure turned slowly to face me, and I felt a chill run down my spine. It was an old man, his face lined with deep wrinkles, his eyes dark and unreadable. He was dressed in a long, tattered coat that looked like it had seen better days, and his hair was wild and unkempt. "You don't belong here," the old man said, his voice low and gravelly. I tightened my grip on the flashlight, my heart racing. "Who are you? What are you doing in my house?" He took a step toward me, and I instinctively took a step back, my mind racing with fear. "This house isn't yours," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's hers." "Hers? You mean Baba Laura?" I asked, confusion mingling with my fear. The old man nodded slowly. She never left, you know. She's still here watching, waiting. A cold shiver ran down my spine as his words sank in. What do you mean? What are you talking about? She doesn't like strangers, he continued, ignoring my questions. She doesn't want you here. I felt a surge of anger push through my fear. This is my house now, I said firmly. My family's house. You have no right to be here. The old man's gaze softened slightly, as if he pitied me. You should leave while you still can, before she makes you. Before I could respond, he turned and walked toward the door, his movements slow and deliberate. I stood there, paralyzed, as he reached for the doorknob and pulled the door open. A gust of cold air rushed in, and in the blink of an eye he was gone, disappearing into the night. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, the open door swinging gently in the wind. My mind raced with questions, with fear, but I didn't dare follow him. I didn't want to know where he had gone or if he would come back. Finally, I closed the door and locked it, my hands trembling. I checked the windows, making sure they were secure, and then hurried back upstairs to check on the kids. They were all still asleep, oblivious to what had just happened. I lingered in each of their rooms, watching them breathe, reassuring myself that they were safe. When I finally returned to my room, I found Danny still curled up in my bed, clutching his teddy bear. I slipped under the covers beside him, holding him close as I tried to calm my racing heart. But sleep wouldn't come. The old man's words echoed in my mind, a warning that I couldn't ignore. Who was he? And what had he meant about Baba Laura? Was she really still here, watching us, waiting? As the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, I made a silent promise to myself. I would protect my family, no matter what. This house was ours now, and I wasn't going to let anyone, living or dead, take that away from us. The morning after the unsettling visit from the old man, I woke up feeling as though I hadn't slept at all. The memory of his eerie words lingered in my mind, casting a shadow over the new day. Despite the bright sunlight streaming through the windows, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right in this house. But life had to go on. The kids were already up and about, their laughter echoing through the hallways as they explored more of the house. It was a relief to see them so full of energy and excitement, seemingly untouched by the strange events of the night before. "Mom, come see what we found." Danny's voice called out, snapping me out of my thoughts. I followed the sound of his voice to the living room, where Danny, Natalie, and Ivan were gathered around an old wooden chest that I hadn't noticed before. The chest was covered in a thick layer of dust, its brass fittings tarnished with age. It looked like it had been there for years, forgotten in a corner of the room. "What is it?" I asked, curious despite my lingering unease. "We don't know," Natalie said, her eyes wide with excitement. "It was just sitting here, under that old blanket. We thought it was just junk, but then Ivan opened it, and you won't believe what's inside." Ivan grinned, clearly pleased with himself. "Check it out, Mum." I stepped closer and peered into the chest. Inside, I saw a collection of old weathered books, a few pieces of faded clothing, and nestled among them, something that caught my eye. A small, ornate box made of dark wood, its surface carved with intricate patterns. "Wow," I breathed, reaching in to pick up the box. It was surprisingly heavy for its size, and the carvings felt rough under my fingertips. "This is beautiful." "Open it," Danny urged, bouncing on the balls of his feet. I hesitated for a moment, a sense of foreboding washing over me. But I couldn't deny my own curiosity. Slowly, I lifted the lid of the box. Inside, resting on a bed of deep green velvet, was an antique silver watch. It was stunning, with delicate engravings on the case and a chain that glinted in the sunlight. The watch was clearly old, but it had been well preserved, its surface polished to a shine. "Whoa," Ivan muttered, leaning in for a closer look. "That's got to be worth something, right?" "It looks really old," Natalie added, her voice tinged with awe. "Do you think it belonged to Baba Laura?" "Maybe," I said, turning the watch over in my hands. It felt like it had a story to tell, a piece of history that had been passed down through the generations. I couldn't help but wonder what secrets it held. But why would it be hidden away like this? "Maybe she didn't want anyone to find it," Natalie suggested, her brow furrowed in thought. "Or maybe it was a special keepsake," Ivan said, his tone more pragmatic. "People used to hide valuable things in case of war or something." This could be, like, really valuable. I nodded, considering their theories. The watch was clearly worth something, both in terms of its craftsmanship and possibly its history. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it than just its monetary value. Why had it been hidden away? And what did it mean that we had found it now, after everything that had happened? Mom, are you okay? Natalie's voice broke through my thoughts, and I realized I had been staring at the watch in silence for too long. Yeah, I'm fine, I said, shaking off the unease. I'm just surprised, I guess. This is a really special find. What are you going to do with it? Ivan asked, clearly already thinking ahead. I'm not sure yet, I admitted, placing the watch back in its velvet-lined box. I need to think about it, but first I want to learn more about it. Maybe there's something in Baba Laura's papers that can tell us where it came from. Can I help you look? Natalie asked, her curiosity piqued. Of course, I said, giving her a smile. I could use all the help I can get. Let's start with the attic. There might be some old documents up there that can give us a clue. As we climbed the narrow, creaky stairs to the attic, I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of anticipation. The attic was dimly lit, the only light coming from a small, dusty window at the far end of the room. Cobwebs clung to the rafters, and the air was thick with the smell of old wood and mothballs. Spooky, Ivan muttered, glancing around warily. It's just an attic, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Let's see what we can find. We started to sort through the piles of old boxes and trunks that were scattered around the room. Most of them were filled with the usual attic fare, old clothes, broken toys, and stacks of yellowed newspapers. But then, tucked away in the corner, we found a small wooden crate that was different from the others. It was carefully sealed, as if its contents were meant to be preserved. This looks promising, I said, prying open the crate with a crowbar Ivan had found in the corner. Inside, wrapped in layers of protective cloth, were several leather-bound journals and a stack of neatly folded papers. The journals were worn and fragile, their pages filled with neat, flowing handwriting. These must be Baba Laura's, Natalie said, picking up one of the journals and carefully leafing through it. There's a lot of writing in here. Maybe it's her diary. Let's see what the papers say, I suggested, unfolding one of the documents. It was a letter written in Russian, with a date that placed it decades before I was born. My Russian was rusty, but I could make out enough to understand that it was addressed to Baba Laura from a distant relative. The letter mentioned something about the watch, though the details were unclear. Can you read it? Ivan asked, watching me closely. Some of it, I said slowly, trying to piece together the meaning. It looks like this relative sent the watch to Baba Laura as a gift, but there's something else. Something about it being important, maybe even dangerous. Dangerous? Natalie repeated, her eyes widening. What do you mean? I'm not sure, I admitted, feeling a knot of anxiety tighten in my chest. I need to translate this properly, but it sounds like the watch might have some kind of significance, something more than just being valuable. That's creepy, Ivan said, clearly unnerved. Maybe we shouldn't mess with it. Or maybe we should figure out what makes it so special, Natalie countered, her curiosity getting the better of her fear. I mean, this could be really important, Mom. I agree, I said, carefully folding the letter back up. But we need to be cautious. If there's something more to this watch, we need to know what we're dealing with. The discovery of the watch and the old letters had cast a new light on the house and its secrets. It was as if Baba Laura had left behind a puzzle for us to solve, a mystery hidden within the walls of this old house. And now, whether I liked it or not, we were right in the middle of it. As we gathered up the journals and letters, ready to bring them downstairs for further study, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The house, the watch, and the strange visit from the old man, everything seemed connected in a way I didn't yet understand. But one thing was clear. The past wasn't ready to stay buried, and it was up to us to uncover the truth. As we descended the stairs, the weight of the watch in its box felt heavier in my hands, as if it carried with it the burden of generations of secrets. And as I looked at my children, their faces a mix of excitement and apprehension, I knew that whatever lay ahead, we would face it together. The days that followed our discovery of the watch were filled with a tense mix of anticipation and dread. The more I thought about the letter and the old man's warning, the more I realized that the watch was not just an ordinary handloom. It was a key, one that might unlock a past I wasn't sure I was ready to confront. Every evening, after the kids were in bed, I would sit at the kitchen table with Baba Laura's journals and the letters, trying to piece together the story they told. The old Russian script was difficult to decipher, but with the help of an online translator and a lot of patience, I began to make sense of the words. One evening, as I was poring over another letter, I heard a soft knock at the kitchen door. My heart skipped a beat. After the encounter with the old man, I was on edge whenever there was an unexpected sound. I walked cautiously to the door and opened it just a crack. "Sophia, it's me," a familiar voice whispered. I sighed in relief and opened the door wider. It was Lena, my neighbor, and the only person I had grown close to since we moved to the village. She had a warm, welcoming presence that always put me at ease, and tonight was no exception. "Lena, you scared me," I said, stepping aside to let her in. "Sorry, I didn't mean to," she said, smiling apologetically as she entered the kitchen. "I saw the light was still on and thought I'd check on you. You've been spending a lot of late nights in here." "Yeah, I've been doing some research," I had admitted, gesturing to the papers spread across the table. "I found something in the house, something that might be important." Lena raised an eyebrow and walked over to the table, glancing at the journals and letters. "These look really old. What are you trying to figure out?" I took a deep breath, unsure of how much to tell her. But I trusted Lena, and I knew I could use her help. "It's about the watch we found, the silver one. I think it has some kind of history, something connected to Baba Laura. But I'm not sure what it all means yet." Lena frowned thoughtfully as she picked up one of the letters and skimmed it. "This is in Russian, isn't it? I can read a little, but this handwriting is tough." "It is," I agreed. "But I've been translating as best I can. So far, I've learned that the watch was a gift to Baba Laura from a relative. But there's more to it, something about it being valuable and possibly dangerous. I think it's tied to some kind of family secret." Lena's eyes widened in surprise. "Dangerous? What do you mean?" "I'm not entirely sure," I admitted, "but there was an old man who showed up the first night we moved in. He warned me that the house wasn't mine and that she, Baba Laura, didn't want us here. He mentioned that she never left and that she's still watching us. It's all so cryptic." Lena's expression turned serious. "That sounds ominous. Did you tell anyone else about the old man?" "No, just the kids. They were scared enough as it is, and I didn't want to make things worse. But now, with what I've been reading, I'm starting to think that this watch might be connected to whatever he was talking about." Lena nodded slowly, her eyes narrowing as she considered the situation. "Do you think the old man might have been right? That there's someone still lingering in the house?" I hesitated, unsure of how to answer. "I don't know. I've never believed in ghosts or spirits, but there's definitely something strange going on. The watch feels like it's more than just an object. It's like it's connected to the house somehow." Lena reached out and touched my arm gently. "Sophia, whatever this is, you don't have to face it alone. I'll help you figure it out. We'll get to the bottom of this mystery together." "Thank you, Lena," I said, feeling a wave of relief. "I'm glad you're here." "I don't think I could do this by myself." She smiled reassuringly. "You're not alone. Now let's see what else we can learn about this watch and what it might mean." We spent the next few hours going through the letters and journals together, comparing notes and trying to piece together the timeline of events. Slowly, a picture began to emerge, one that was more complex and disturbing than I had imagined. It turned out that Baba Laura had been more than just a simple village woman. According to the letters, she had been involved in something that spanned across generations, a secret that had been passed down through the women in our family. The watch was a symbol of that secret, a token of power and responsibility. One of the letters mentioned an agreement that had been made long ago, an agreement that Baba Laura was bound to uphold. The details were vague, but it seemed that the watch was somehow tied to that agreement, a tool or a key that could be used to either fulfill or break the pact. "What kind of agreement do you think it was?" Lena asked, her voice hushed as she read over the letter. "I'm not sure," I said, frowning as I tried to make sense of the words. "But it sounds like it was something serious, something that Baba Laura took very seriously. And now it's been passed down to me, whether I like it or not." Lena looked at me with concern. Sophia, this sounds dangerous. If there's something dark connected to this watch, you might want to consider getting rid of it. I've thought about that, I admitted. But what if getting rid of it makes things worse? What if this agreement still holds, and by breaking it, I put my family in danger? Lena's expression turned grim. Then we need to find out exactly what this agreement is and what your role in it is supposed to be. We can't make any decisions until we have all the information. I nodded, feeling a mix of determination and fear. You're right. We need to keep digging. There's got to be more information here, maybe in the journals. Barbalaura must have written about it somewhere. As we continued to search through the journals, I noticed something odd. Several pages had been torn out from the middle of one of the books. The jagged edges suggested that they had been ripped out hastily, as if someone had wanted to erase whatever had been written there. Lena, look at this, I said, showing her the torn pages. She frowned as she examined the damage. That's strange. Why would someone tear out these pages? What were they trying to hide? I don't know, I said, feeling a pang of frustration, but whatever it was, it must have been important. Lena leaned back in her chair, her brow furrowed in thought. Maybe there's another way to find out what was on those pages. If we can figure out who else knew about this agreement, we might be able to piece together the missing information. I thought for a moment, then remembered something the old man had said. She's still here watching, waiting. Lena, do you think it's possible that Barbalaura left something behind? Something hidden in the house, like a clue or a message? Lena's eyes lit up with excitement. It's possible. People used to do that, leave hidden compartments or secret notes for their descendants to find. If Barbalaura wanted to protect this secret, she might have hidden something here for you to discover. The idea sparked a new sense of urgency in me. Then we need to search the house. There might be something we've missed, another hidden compartment, a hidden message, something that can help us understand what's really going on. Lena nodded, already on her feet. Let's start with the areas we haven't checked thoroughly yet. The basement, the attic, anywhere that could hide a secret. We spent the next few days combing through the house, searching for any signs of hidden compartments or messages. The kids were curious but didn't ask too many questions, sensing that this was something serious. They helped us where they could, but mostly it was Lena and me, working side by side as we explored every nook and cranny. Finally, after days of searching, we found it, hidden behind a loose brick in the fireplace. It was a small, leather-bound notebook, worn and fragile, but intact. I could hardly believe it when Lena pulled it out, her hands trembling with excitement. This has to be it, she said, handing it to me. I opened the notebook carefully, the pages brittle with age. The handwriting inside was unmistakably Barbalaura's, neat and precise. As I began to read, the pieces of the puzzle started to fall into place. The notebook contained a detailed account of the agreement, a pact made between our family and a mysterious entity long before Barbalaura's time. The watch was a symbol of that pact, a tool that allowed the bearer to communicate with the entity and uphold the terms of the agreement. But the notebook also revealed something else, something that sent a chill down my spine. The agreement wasn't just about power or responsibility. It was a bargain, one that came with a terrible price. In exchange for protection and prosperity, the women in our family were bound to the entity, their lives and the lives of their descendants intertwined with its will. The watch was both a gift and a curse, a means of control that could not be easily broken. As I read the final entry, written in a shaky hand, I realized the full extent of what Barbalaura had tried to do. She had hidden the watch and torn out the pages of the journal in an attempt to break the cycle, to free her descendants from the burden she had carried. But in doing so, she had also angered the entity, setting in motion a chain of events that had led to the old man's warning. She tried to protect us, I whispered, my voice trembling. But she couldn't. The watch, it's not just an heirloom. It's a trap. Lena looked at me with wide eyes. Sophia, what are you going to do? I closed the notebook, feeling the weight of the decision that lay ahead. I don't know yet. But one thing is clear, we can't just ignore this. The watch is more dangerous than I ever imagined. I have to find a way to end this once and for all. Lena placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. We'll figure this out together. I nodded, grateful for her support. But deep down, I knew that this was something I would have to face on my own. The watch had been passed down to me, and with it, the responsibility of breaking the curse that had haunted my family for generations. As I looked around the old house, I realized that it wasn't just a place of refuge anymore. It was a battleground, a place where the past and the present were colliding in a struggle for control. And as the new bearer of the watch, I was at the center of it all. The mystery of the watch had been unraveled, but the true challenge was only just beginning.